Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere warm, like humid blanket wrapped around your legs kind of warm, the kind of warm where even your sweat has sweat. Welcome to 18th century Jamaica, land of sugarcane, hurricanes, and some of the most fascinating cold remedies ever whispered under a mango tree. You're not here to start a plantation or chart trade winds. No, you're sick, sniffling, coughing, and in desperate need of something hot, soothing, and maybe slightly magical. You've heard rumors of healing teas, spells disguised as bedtime prayers, and stews that simmer for days, all managed by quietly powerful women who know how to read a fever like a letter from the gods. Of course, you probably won't survive this century. Not to be dramatic, but smallpox is circling, yellow fever likes to surprise, and even the common cold can spiral into a spiritual crisis. But hey, while you're still upright, there's ginger in the pot and garlic on the breeze. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? What time is it there? Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive near the coast, a few miles from Port Royal. It's 1702. The sea breeze is sweet with sugarcane and fermenting pineapple. There's a thatched hut in the distance, and a small trail of smoke curling into the air. The woman who lives here, nobody calls her by her full name, just Miss Essie, is already awake, already chopping something with an unreasonably sharp machete that might once have been part of a sugar mill. She doesn't look up when you approach, just points at a rough wooden bench, the international symbol for sit, you're sick. Her hut is simple. Clay walls streaked with soot and ochre, a roof patched with banana leaves. Dried herbs dangle from the rafters, lemon balm, sarsaparilla, bissy root, and something that smells like wet socks and eucalyptus had a love child. The inside is cool, shaded, and full of that gentle, uneven silence that comes from living close to the forest. Miss Essie doesn't waste time. She's already boiling water in a blackened iron pot balanced on 3 stones. It bubbles like it's in a hurry. Into it, she tosses handfuls of what might be guinea hen weed. You've definitely never seen that at Whole Foods. A fat curl of orange peel, and a hunk of raw garlic that could down a vampire from 20 paces. She hums while she stirs, something slow, rhythmic, not quite a tune, more like a memory wrapped in melody. This is not just tea. This is a warm rebuke to whatever's messing with your sinuses. Historians still argue whether these herbalists, often women of African descent, many of them enslaved or recently freed, should be called doctors, midwives, or sorcerers. The records are spotty, mostly written by colonial officials who didn't understand half of what was going on in these huts. But what's clear is this: people trusted them. More than they trusted the pale, powdered physicians imported from Europe, who prescribed leeches for everything from heartbreak to hangnails. Miss Essie finishes the brew, ladles it into a gourd bowl, and hands it to you with a look that says, "Don't sniff it, just drink." You obey. It's bitter, wild. It tastes like roots and rain and the underside of a leaf. But it warms you instantly, throat to toes. Your nose starts to run in a good way. There's something in it, maybe pepper elder or Spanish needle, that kicks open your sinuses like someone flinging open shutters on a musty old house. She grunts in approval. You've passed the first test. As you sip, she crouches by a smaller pot and starts chopping yams. "They're not for you. This is for the spirits," she mutters, almost as an afterthought. "The ancestors who still walk these grounds like they've misplaced their keys." You're not sure whether to feel comforted or creeped out. Probably both. By now, chickens are clucking in the distance. A dog yawns under a breadfruit tree. The sun is inching up, dragging humidity behind it like a wet robe. You're sweating, but you don't mind. This place, oddly, feels safe. Not many visitors come out this far. Those who do are either desperate or curious, sometimes both. You might have the chills, but you're also getting an education. Because Miss Essie doesn't just hand you tea, she watches you drink it, studying how you sneeze, how your pupils dilate, how your hand trembles when you lift the bowl. She's reading you like a living scroll. In European medicine of the time, you'd be dosed with mercury or locked in a room to sweat it out. But here, healing is layered. The cold might be physical, yes, but maybe you also offended a spirit. Maybe your dream last night left a crack in your soul. Maybe you stepped in the wrong anthill without greeting the queen ant. Quirky? Maybe. But also logical, if you consider healing not as science, but as story. She takes your bowl, nods again, and turns back to her chopping board. The next part of the cure is going to involve soup, but not just yet. First, she needs to find her cat. Apparently, no serious remedy begins without it nearby. You don't ask why. You're just here to get better, and hopefully not end up possessed. You're still sitting on the bench, knees slightly steamy from the morning sun, when the cat returns. It's a raggedy thing. One ear nicked, eyes like jade marbles, and a tail that flicks like it's been offended by your entire bloodline. Miss Essie scoops it up with one arm, holds it briefly like a talisman, then lets it settle on a high shelf above the herb jars. Only now, apparently, can proper healing begin. She beckons you inside. The hut's interior smells like a spice cabinet got into a fist fight with a swamp. It's not unpleasant, just layered. You detect ginger, wood smoke, lime, dried rosemary, and something sharp that tingles the back of your throat. There's no furniture, just a few stools, a low sleeping mat, and a small shrine in the corner. A carved gourd with feathers stuck in it, a saucer of rice, and a single bright red hibiscus bloom floating in oil. The air's cooler here, almost heavy, like it's listening. This is the healer's hut, but it's also her pharmacy, her chapel, and her classroom. And the first thing you notice, beyond the cat now napping like it owns the place, is the sheer number of plants hanging upside down from the ceiling like a jungle on slow drip. Miss Essie moves through them like a ghost who's rearranged this same space in her sleep for decades. She selects a few leaves, something with serrated edges and a suspiciously aggressive smell, and places them on a rough wooden table. You're invited to touch, to sniff, to listen. She doesn't give names in English, at least not at first. The leaves have Creole names, African names, names that sound like wind and birdsong. There's fever grass, which you later realize is lemongrass, cerasee, a bitter vine that could peel paint off a wall, and dog blood bush. Yep, that's a real thing. Spoiler, it's not made of dogs. She tells you a story for each one. Cerasee, she says, is for when the cold won't leave. But be careful, it's bitter enough to make you question your life choices. Fever grass soothes the belly and clears the head. Dog blood? Best not ask. Just trust it's good for cleansing. In European records, these herbalists were often described as obscure or superstitious, which is what people say when they don't understand a system that refuses to be written in Latin. But make no mistake, Miss Essie knows her science. She just doesn't call it that. Historians still argue whether these remedies originated solely from West African traditions or were blended with Taino practices and even fragments of European herb lore. The truth, like most folk traditions, is tangled, just like the vines above your head. She pulls out a small wooden pestle and grinds something that smells like cloves and motor oil. You try not to sneeze. She chuckles softly. Your nose waking up, she says. That good. She hands you a folded square of cloth, warm and slightly damp. You press it to your forehead. It's infused with peppermint and allspice oil, and suddenly your sinuses open like temple doors. You sit there, eyes watering gently, while she lights a small coil of something that smells like burnt mango skins and honey. Smoke curls around the hut lazily. It's not just about the body here. Healing is layered. Miss Essie believes colds come with messages, not just from the body, but from the spirit, the past, even the weather. If you're sniffling, you've likely ignored something. A warning, a dream, a promise you didn't keep. She asks you a question so softly, you're not sure if she spoke or if the hut whispered it. You dream anything last night? You admit you did. Something about your grandmother, a goat in a rainstorm. She nods like that explains everything. The next round of treatment involves crushed hibiscus petals stirred into lukewarm rainwater. She hands it to you with a straight face. You drink. It's tangy and weirdly comforting, like cranberry juice with a vendetta. Suddenly, Miss Essie pauses and sniffs the air. Something's missing. She reaches for a jar, clear, filled with what looks like mud and glitter. Healing dirt, she says. You blink. She scoops a tiny bit onto her finger and taps it behind your ears. Cold. Gritty, smells like cinnamon and wet pennies. She grins. Now the sickness won't find where you live. You're not sure if she means your body or your actual house. You don't ask. You've stopped asking by now. There's logic here, but it's not linear. It's circular. It loops like a calypso beat, returning to themes: warmth, protection, cleansing, story. Outside, a rooster crows like it's auditioning for a solo. Inside, your breath slows. The heat wraps you like a sleepy python. And somewhere between the smoke, the herbs, and the whispered names of plants, you realize you don't feel quite as bad as you did this morning. Miss Essie gives you a final nod, the universal signal for you'll live. She pats her cat once, who glares like it didn't approve of your vibes, and begins to hum again. You're not cured. Not yet. But something shifted. The hut, the plants, the old cat, the whisper of your dream, all of it has tucked a little magic into your bloodstream. And you haven't even had the soup yet. You're told to wait under the pimento tree while she prepares the next step. You shuffle outside where the shade is patchy and the air hums with insects that seem to have personal vendettas against your ankles. Miss Essie moves like she's part of the landscape, collecting things in a hand-woven basket that's patched with string and hope. She moves through the brush with a kind of casual authority, barefoot but sure-footed, pausing now and then to talk to a plant. Not out loud, but you can tell there's communication happening. A leaf brushed gently, a stem turned just so. She picks only what she needs, never more. You get the sense that the forest keeps a tab. Eventually, she returns with handfuls of roots, herbs, and what might be a small piece of bark that looks disturbingly like a peeled scab. She gives it a sniff and shrugs. Into the basket it goes. She drops the haul onto a cloth and begins to sort. One pile for steeping, one for burning, one for rubbing, and one, you're pretty sure, for some sort of soup. The good kind. The kind that might offend your sinuses into submission. It's mid-morning now. The air has thickened like warm syrup, and your skin feels sticky under your collar. But you sit obediently, watching her movements like a student too scared to fail bush medicine class. Time for morning brew, she mutters. This is not a cup of tea. This is a concoction that would make Starbucks file a restraining order. Into a tall clay pot, she adds water, strips of lime peel, crushed ginger root, and a few leaves that look suspiciously like they were hiding in a reptile enclosure. One of them might be guinea hen weed again, or maybe it's a cousin. She doesn't label. She just knows. You hear the crackle of firewood. The pot begins to bubble. She tells you to stand nearby and inhale the steam. Not just breathe it. Inhale it like you mean it. You do. It burns, not in a painful way, more like your sinuses just got a deep tissue massage. Then comes the real deal, the brew itself. She ladles it into a gourd again. The color is somewhere between pond water and ancient bronze coin. She hands it to you with a sly grin. Don't sip like foreigner. Big swallow. You gulp. It's warm, bitter, vaguely citrusy, and gives your entire respiratory system a motivational speech. The garlic hits you first, followed by ginger and something sharp and peppery that might be Scotch bonnet in disguise. There's also an undertone of something floral, but only if your tongue's feeling brave. Historians still argue whether guinea hen weed, one of the most beloved cold fighters in the Caribbean, actually has significant antimicrobial properties or just makes people sweat so aggressively they forget they were sick. Either way, Miss Essie is a fan. She calls it spirit grass, says it runs out the sickness like a bad tenant. Quirky side note, in some communities, this very brew was also believed to chase off unwanted lovers. You're not sure if that's because of its potency or just the way your breath smells after drinking it. You lean back against the tree and wait for the warmth to work its way down your throat and into your chest. There's a lull, just birdsong, the occasional buzz of a particularly loud beetle, and the distant sound of water being drawn from a well. Miss Essie breaks the silence. Cold's not just body problem, she says. Sometime it's your spirit get damp. You nod like that makes perfect sense, even though you're still halfway focused on whether your tongue is supposed to feel like it's doing jazzercise. She goes on, explaining that in her view, shared by many healers on the island, a cold can sneak in through emotional cracks. Unspoken grief, a broken promise, too many nights ignoring the moon. She points to her chest. When you not speak truth, it's settle here, she says. Turn into coughing. You can't argue with her logic. In fact, you've had more than a few colds after ignoring big feelings. Maybe there's something to this. She hands you a small square of cloth infused with camphor and coconut oil, tells you to tuck it under your pillow later. It pulls the night out, she says cryptically. Then she disappears into the hut again. You hear chopping, sizzling, the unmistakable sound of something being dropped into a pot with love and mild vengeance. Soup time. In 18th century Jamaica, soup wasn't just food. It was therapy, insurance, and prayer all boiled together. Whether you were enslaved, free, Creole, maroon, merchant, or missionary, a good soup could make you feel halfway human again. Miss Essie's soup starts with a goat bone, charred, not boiled. Into the pot go onions, scotch bonnet, a fistful of thyme, breadfruit chunks, and something green and squiggly that she calls Callaloo's angry cousin. You don't ask for clarification. She stirs, hums, tosses in a handful of saltfish flakes for strength and salt, and lets the thing simmer like it's auditioning for a dream sequence. Eventually, she ladles out a bowl for you. The smell is intoxicating, spicy, rich, comforting, and vaguely threatening. You eat. Slowly, carefully. Every bite feels like a warm hand on your back. And the soup does what it came to do. Your shoulders relax, your head clears, even your bones feel like they've been washed. And then, just before you take the final sip, Miss Essie sits beside you and says, "Now we get to the real healing." You swallow. Oh, good. That wasn't it? She takes your bowl gently, sets it aside, and pats her knees like she's inviting a child to sit for story time. You don't climb into her lap, relax, but you do inch closer, drawn in by the sudden shift in mood. The breeze pauses. Even the cat blinks awake like it doesn't want to miss this part. You know why the nose run? She asks. You hazard a guess. Maybe too much soup or that pepper that nearly sent your sinuses to the astral plane? She chuckles. Because something inside tried to leave. Sometimes it's just cold. Sometimes it's a lie you tell yourself too long. Okay then, deep breaths. She reaches into a woven pouch and pulls out a small vial. It's dark green, almost black, and thick like tree sap. She opens it, dabs a bit onto her thumb, and smears it across your forehead in a line. It's warm, smells like crushed mint leaves in an old church pew, and tingles like static electricity. This is the start of drawing out. Not just mucus, but mood. Miss Essie believes that sickness leaves clues in your face, in how your jaw clenches, how your eyebrows knit, how your eyes forget how to twinkle. She peers at you, not unkindly, but with surgical curiosity. She tells you stories while she works. About a boy who caught a cold because he lied about stealing sugarcane. About a woman whose cough wouldn't quit until she sang a song she'd been holding in for 10 years. You suspect there's exaggeration involved. But in this world, metaphor is medicine. Historians still debate whether these practices qualify as spiritual healing or just savvy psychology wrapped in ritual. But the effect is undeniable. When someone looks you in the eye and says your soul has a cramp, and then proceeds to massage your temples while humming a song your grandmother might have known, you don't ask for credentials. She pulls out a small wooden box next. Inside, a folded parchment, a few crushed herbs, and something that looks very much like a chicken's foot wearing a bracelet. You gulp. She ignores your expression. This, she says softly, is the spell part. Now don't panic. You're not about to get cursed. This is what's called a blessing fix, a kind of low-key spiritual nudge meant to set things right. It's not magic like lightning bolts. It's magic like boiling water and someone remembering your name. She lights a bit of dried sage and waves the smoke over you, muttering in patois. It sounds like a lullaby if the lullaby were written by a sleepy ancestor with a strong opinion about hydration. Then she hands you a pebble, smooth, warm, wrapped in a piece of banana leaf. Keep this in your pocket, she instructs. It reminds your sickness it not welcome. You do as you're told. She moves back to her bench and begins to grind a fresh blend of leaves, this time guava, orange peel, and a bark she calls Fever Whisperer. It smells sharper than the others, almost citrusy with a note of smoke. You're told to lean over it, breathe in, and repeat quietly after her. Me body hot, but my soul cool. You repeat it once, twice, a third time softer. It feels silly until it doesn't. Because in this little yard with sun filtering through pimento leaves and the pot bubbling behind you, it kind of makes sense that part of you could be too hot, while another part is too cold. The thing is, in 18th century Jamaica, people couldn't separate the physical from the spiritual the way modern medicine tries to. A cold wasn't just snot. It was imbalance. It was grief, anger, shame, even too much sun without enough song. Miss Essie tells you about how certain plants grow better if you talk to them first. How guinea hen weed refuses to work if you pick it in a bad mood. How some roots only wake up when harvested before sunrise, barefoot after a dreamless sleep. Quirky? Maybe. But plants do respond to tone, vibration, touch. There's a reason she doesn't keep clocks. She listens instead. You hear laughter in the distance, kids chasing a chicken through someone's garden. Life moves on. People sniffle. They cough. And they walk barefoot through mud to this hut because Miss Essie makes you feel heard even when you can't speak through your congestion. She begins preparing your next rub. This one's made of coconut oil, mashed garlic, ground pimento, and something she refers to only as sweet sleep root. It's applied behind your ears, under your arms, and brace yourself between your toes. You don't question it anymore. That smell you're now wearing? Warm, spicy, pungent, comforting. You smell like a hug from someone's mystical grandmother. As she works, she tells you one more story about her own teacher, an old woman who once healed a merchant by making him drink okra juice and dance in a thunderstorm. You raise an eyebrow. She just shrugs. Sometimes the spirit need to move, she says, even if it get wet. You nod, sticky-footed and sleepy-eyed, and lean back against the tree again. There's still soup in the pot. There's still steam in the air. But something inside you has shifted. You don't know if it's the herbs, the spell, or the way Miss Essie looked at you like you mattered. But your nose has stopped running, and for the first time in days, you might be able to nap without coughing yourself awake. By now, your limbs are heavy with that sleepy satisfaction only a well-fed soul can know. Not the kind of full from a heavy feast. This is subtler. Like your body is just a little less offended by being alive today. You sit still, bones sinking into the dirt-packed floor just outside Miss Essie's hut as she watches you with quiet amusement. You've been fed, rubbed down, steamed, blessed, whispered to, and mildly assaulted by ginger-laced tea. You might actually be on the mend. She hums something wordless, then rises with a slow stretch of her back that sounds like wood settling in the sun. You still got wind in you, she says, side-eyeing you like a kettle that hasn't finished hissing. You blink. Wind? Like gas? Energy? An unsettled ghost swirling around your spleen? She doesn't explain, just gestures with a crooked finger. Come. You follow her around the hut, through a narrow, well-trodden path lined with wild mint and bush tea plants, down to a tiny grove of mango, pimento, and soursop trees. The air here feels different, heavier, not threatening, just thick with hush. The kind of quiet that makes you whisper without knowing why. In the center of the grove is a flat stone, smoothed by centuries of sitting and secrets. Beside it lies a gourd, turned upside down like a bowl laid to rest. She touches the stone with her palm and nods for you to do the same. You do. It's warm, almost unnervingly so. This the whisper tree, she says, brushing her fingers along the trunk of the nearest mango tree. Here's where we ask. Ask what? Again, no clarification. She kneels and begins arranging items from the folds of her wrap skirt. 2 sprigs of fever grass, a tiny square of brown cloth, a single chicken feather, and a piece of charcoal wrapped in plantain leaf. These are placed carefully on the stone, forming what might be a pattern, or might just be what the moment calls for. She instructs you to sit opposite her, cross-legged, palms up. You comply, awkwardly, legs creaking like the hinges of a sugarcane press. Then she begins. Not a chant, not a prayer. It's quieter than that. Murmured words in a lilting mix of English patois and something older. The language isn't meant to be understood with the ears. It's for the body, the breath, maybe the trees. She sprinkles a few drops of water from a small calabash bowl into the soil. To soften the ground, she mutters. For what, she doesn't say. Then she asks softly, if you had any strange dreams last night. You hesitate, then describe something vague. Rain, a dog, your grandmother, a cracked teacup. She nods as if you've just recited the coordinates to a very specific problem. In the world of Jamaican bush medicine, dreams matter. They're not just random neural fireworks. They're messages, diagnostics. Your subconscious sending smoke signals when your body forgets how to ask for help. Miss Essie explains that colds are often just the body reacting to noise, internal and external, a buildup of unsaid things, skipped rituals, sorrow too polite to shout. The sniffles, the sneezes, the aching knees, they're not symptoms, they're messengers. Historians still argue whether these rituals were medicine, therapy, or proto-psychology cloaked in spiritual practice. There are no clinical trials for whispering to trees, but there's centuries of oral tradition and an undeniable sense of presence in this small grove that makes your doubt feel like the actual superstition. You close your eyes, breathe deep. Miss Essie lights a sprig of dried rosemary and lets the smoke drift upward in a lazy spiral. She waves it towards you, muttering something about clearing the path. You don't move. You just let the smoke wrap around your head like a sleepy scarf. Then, a sharp clap, her palms striking together once, loud and sudden. You jolt. The birds do too. She grins. Now they listening. You sit in stillness for a few minutes. The silence isn't empty. It buzzes with insect wings, distant roosters, leaves brushing each other like gossiping grandmothers. She passes you a stone, smooth and flat, wrapped in red thread. For your pocket, she says, to remind the sickness it don't live here no more. You hold it tightly. The warmth from the sun still lingers in its belly. Is it magic? A placebo? Who cares? It feels good in your hand. Grounding. On the way back, you pass through her tiny herb patch again. It's not a garden in any European sense. No neat rows or little white signs with Latin names. Just glorious chaos. Plantain trees shading thyme, guinea hen weed curling around sweet basil, okra flowering next to lemongrass that's taller than you. She plucks a leaf and presses it into your palm. This one watch you sleep tonight. You don't ask what it's called. Somehow, that feels rude. You just nod and slide it into your pocket with the stone. The hut reappears around the bend, smoke trailing from its low chimney. You catch a waft of stew thickening over the fire, saltfish and yam this time, maybe a touch of tamarind. Before you re-enter, Miss Essie stops you, presses her finger to the space just between your eyes. Still warm, she says, but not burning. Is that good? She nods. The spirit is listening again. You take one final look back at the whispering grove, half expecting to see something shift in the trees. Nothing does. And yet you feel a little less alone in your bones, a little less blocked in your breath. You still have a cold, but it's quieter now, more polite. Back at the hut, the fire has mellowed, embers glowing like sleepy eyes behind the black iron pot. Miss Essie hums as she tends it, the kind of melody that doesn't bother being catchy. It's just there, like a familiar smell in your childhood kitchen. You lower yourself onto the low bench again, this time with considerably more creaking than before. Whether it's your knees or your spirit or both, something's been stretched today. She ladles out a second helping of soup, not as a courtesy, but as continuation. The first one was to open you, she says. This one is to keep you open. You accept the bowl like a sacred object. It's thicker now, richer. The flavors have settled into a confident harmony. The Scotch bonnet still sings soprano in the back of your throat, but now it's joined by the earthy baritone of breadfruit and the gentle alto of thyme. You sip slowly, reverently. Your sinuses, no longer staging a rebellion, nod in agreement. Soup in 18th century Jamaica wasn't just for the sick, it was for everybody. Breakfast, soup. Midday heat, soup. Family gathering, also soup. Especially the ones loaded with herbs thought to chase away chills, which in those days could mean anything from a common cold to a lurking spirit. Soup was the edible intersection of the medicinal and the magical, and the recipes, never written, always told. Passed from hand to hand, whisper to whisper. One generation's spicy broth could become the next generation's cure for lovesickness or liver complaints. Miss Essie scoops a pinch of salt into her palm and tosses it over her shoulder. For balance, she mutters. You assume she means spiritual balance, but honestly, it could just be for flavor. Historians still argue about how much of this ritual was spiritual practice versus pure culinary instinct. One man's incantation is another woman's seasoning. She begins slicing open a tamarind pod with practiced precision. You watch the sticky pulp stretch like taffy between her fingers. This for your throat, she says, and your temper. You raise an eyebrow. She doesn't elaborate. Apparently tamarind is cooling, an important trait in traditional humoral medicine, which was popular across the Caribbean and West Africa. The idea was to balance the hot and cold elements in the body. Too hot? You need something cool. Too cold? Spice it up. Your cold, judging by the sweating and sneezing, has been deemed hot, which means cooling herbs, grounding roots, and foods that quiet the fire. You sip the tamarind infusion, tangy, slightly sour, oddly soothing, like lemon if lemon had a philosophical crisis and mellowed out. She moves around the hut again, this time opening a heavy clay jar. From it she pulls a bundle of dried leaves tied with string and peppercorns. She waves it near your head. Don't flinch, she warns. Then, swiftly, almost playfully, she whaps you once on the crown. Thwack! The bundle makes a soft thump, and your scalp tingles like it's just been lightly exfoliated by a ghost. She smiles. Now the spirit know you listening. You're beginning to suspect that most of this healing process isn't about curing in the way modern medicine thinks about it. It's more like an internal weather report. You've been cloudy with a chance of sneezing. Now the forecast is improving. She invites you to help stir the pot, carefully, clockwise, only clockwise. When you almost absent-mindedly go counterclockwise, she lets out a tiny gasp like you've insulted her great-grandmother. Always stir sunwise, she scolds gently. Bring heat where it need to go. You apologize. The cat yawns loudly, as if embarrassed for you. From the pot's thickening aroma, you catch a new scent. Nutmeg, maybe? Or allspice? Miss Essie confirms both. Make body warm from inside out, she says, handing you a small chunk of roasted yam to chew between sips. It's soft, sweet, and grounding. The kind of food that tells your stomach, hey, we're okay now. She pauses and pulls out a book. Well, more like a bundle of pages tied together with twine and patched with waxed cloth. It looks like it's been licked by time. She flips it open to a page filled with handwritten notes, some in shaky English, others in Creole, others still in a pictographic shorthand only she could probably read. This my mother book, she says, and her mother before that. Every recipe here is a spell, or a stew, or both. You lean in. There are drawings of leaves, arrows pointing to phases of the moon, a small note next to a drawing of what looks like guinea henweed, boil for cough, burn for lies. Quirky? Absolutely. But you start to see how it all weaves together. The plants, the rituals, the soup. It's not superstition. It's language. A language where fever means listen closer, and a runny nose might mean something's missing. Outside, the sky shifts. Late afternoon sun filters through the trees, casting long gold shadows that stretch like yawns across the earth. You're not just recovering from a cold. You're being rewoven into something. Miss Essie pours you one last half bowl, says nothing, just nods toward it like a benediction. You sip. The flavors are rounder now. The fire's softened into a lullaby. You let out a deep sigh without meaning to. She smiles, she says, we start the hard part. You blink. Wait, that wasn't the hard part? No more soup, she adds. Now we listen. No more soup. No more steaming bowls of comfort laced with garlic and mysterious leaves that may or may not have been blessed by moonlight. Now comes the part Miss Essie calls listening time. And from the tone of her voice, it's not negotiable. She gestures for you to follow again, not far, just to the large rock beside her hut, shaded by a pimento tree with bark that smells like warm clove. You sit. She sits opposite you, a bit lower, knees pulled to her chest. The cat joins too, stretches once, then curls up directly on your foot like a mildly passive-aggressive slipper. Now, Miss Essie begins, you tell me what the colds say. You stare at her blankly. Is this a riddle? She doesn't repeat the question, just waits, eyes steady. One brow slightly raised like a patient aunt who already knows the answer and is giving you time to catch up. You think, then speak, haltingly at first. You mention feeling run down, tired, overwhelmed, the usual suspects. But she shakes her head gently. Not what your mouth say, what your sick say. That stops you. And then like a trickle from a crack in a jug, you begin to talk. About the restlessness, about feeling like your breath has been shallow for days, how you haven't been sleeping well, how it's not just your nose that's blocked, but your thoughts too. Miss Essie nods, not once, but slowly, repeatedly, like she's rocking your words in her lap. You talk more, about the way the days blur, how you forget to pause, how you haven't let yourself grieve someone, maybe not even a person, maybe just an idea of who you used to be. She doesn't offer platitudes, doesn't interrupt, just lets you unravel. Historians still argue whether 18th century Jamaican herbalists, especially the root doctors and Obeah women, should be categorized as physical healers or spiritual counselors. But if you're being honest, right now, Miss Essie is both your doctor and your confessor. She speaks softly, almost to herself. Sometimes the cold come when the heart too full, like a kettle left on too long. You don't hear the whistle until you burning. Then she reaches into a pocket in her apron and pulls out a tiny glass bottle sealed with wax. It's cloudy inside, bits of root, maybe flower petals, floating in something syrupy. She uncorks it and dabs a bit behind your ears, then at the inside of your wrists. The scent is delicate, sweet, woody, faintly floral, not strong but grounding. She calls it whisper oil. It's to make the truth easier to carry, she says. You close your eyes, breathe it in, and for a moment, everything slows. She pulls out a flat stone next, one smooth enough to reflect the sky, and places it between you. Now, she says, you say it. Say what? She taps the stone. The thing your cold been trying to tell you. You hesitate. Then you whisper, I'm tired of pretending I'm not tired. She smiles. Not wide, just enough. That's a good one, she says. That a truth the plants can work with. In many Afro-Caribbean healing traditions, words are considered just as medicinal as herbs. The act of speaking aloud a buried truth was thought to be part of the healing process. You weren't just given medicine, you had to participate in it. Miss Essie reaches into her pouch again and pulls out another leaf bundle. This one's tied with a blue thread and smells like fresh rain on cement. She hands it to you. Put this under your pillow tonight. It catch what your mouth forget to say. She doesn't explain what's in it. You've learned better than to ask. She pours you a final, tiny cup of ginger and peppermint tea. It's sharp, cooling, meant to close the pores now that the spirit's been aired out. It zips through your body like a line drawn under a sentence. The sun has dipped lower now. Shadows stretch long and soft. The pimento tree hums with bees. You ask her about the humming, whether she chooses those melodies or if they just happen. She grins. They come from the roots, she says. When you spend enough time with the earth, it starts sending you lullabies. And with that, she begins to sing. Not a performance, a breath of song. Soft, low, repetitive. The words are hard to catch, floating somewhere between lullaby and prayer, but they feel familiar, like the sound of someone cooking in the next room when you're half asleep. The cat sighs. You exhale. Something shifts in the air, not dramatic, just lighter. You've been opened, softened, heard, and stirred, both physically and otherwise. You're not just a body with a runny nose anymore. You're a spirit learning how to make space for itself again. Miss Essie finishes the song, stands and pats you on the head gently like she's smoothing your aura. That's enough for today, she says. No more words. Just let the wind do its work now. And you sit there, in the hush of the grove, in the hush of your own breath, and you finally begin to listen. The next morning finds you wrapped in a blanket of birdsong and the smell of smoked wood. No coughing fit wakes you. No sudden sneeze shatters your peace. Just the warm weight of the cat still sleeping on your feet and a slightly damp leaf tucked into your pillow, crinkled from the night's dreaming. Miss Essie is already up. Of course she is. You hear her outside, sweeping the packed earth yard with a bundle of twigs tied together like an old broomstick with opinions. Each swish sounds deliberate, like it's clearing more than just leaves. You step out to the smell of something new. Something. English? You're not wrong. There, sitting stiffly on a carved stool with the posture of a man who doesn't believe in chairs without backs, is a colonial doctor. Pale coat, brass buttons, long-suffering expression. He holds a lace handkerchief delicately over his nose, as if the mere presence of herbs might infect him with feeling. He eyes you with polite suspicion, nods without warmth, and turns back to Miss Essie. She continues stirring a pot, unbothered. It seems this is not their first encounter. In the 18th century, Jamaica's medical scene was a strange mashup of science, superstition, racism, and resistance. The island was full of British-trained doctors armed with bleeding tools and Latin textbooks, but also full of enslaved and free African herbalists who understood the land, the weather, and the body in ways no lecture hall could teach. Miss Essie ladles something thick and dark into a ceramic bowl and offers it to the doctor without a word. He sniffs it, winces, sips. His eyebrows rise, despite himself. Rather spicy, he mutters. Then, might I ask what this is meant to treat? Miss Essie shrugs. What you feel when you wake. He blinks. That's not specific. Neither is your cough, she replies. The cat sneezes loudly again, as if in punctuation. Historians still argue whether these exchanges between colonial doctors and local herbalists were collaborations or constant battles. Often, it was both. Some European doctors recognized the power of local plants, using tamarind, sarsaparilla, even bissy nut in their prescriptions, while others dismissed bush medicine as dangerous nonsense. And to be fair, some of it was dangerous nonsense. There were potions that could cause hallucinations, powders that burned the skin, roots that slowed the heart. But so could mercury, and mercury was considered cutting edge at the time. The real difference? One group believed illness could be diagnosed by the pulse. The other listened to dreams, breath, the tension in a person's shoulders. One relied on imported theory. The other relied on generations of lived experience passed through whispers and soup spoons. You watch as the doctor tries a second spoonful, then a third. He doesn't ask for the recipe. Of course not. But he lingers longer than he needs to. Glances again at the jars hanging from the rafters, at the sketchbook of plants lying open near the fire. "You've created a fascinating arrangement here," he says, tone clipped. Miss Essie hums noncommittally. She's crushing allspice berries in a bowl now, not looking at him. "Did you know," he adds, almost absently, "that willow bark reduces fever?" She looks up, eyes sharp. "We call it river whisper." He freezes, then nods. Just once. It's a quiet acknowledgement, but a meaningful one. Two entirely different systems of medicine, clashing in philosophy, language, and politics, yet landing on the same bark. You wonder what might have been possible if they'd ever truly listened to each other. Eventually, the doctor stands, brushing imaginary dust off his coat. "Good day," he says, before vanishing down the path with the poise of someone walking away from an unsolvable riddle. Miss Essie watches him go, muttering something about men with stiff shoes and soft lungs. You grin. She turns to you. "Still feel better?" You nod, and you do. Not just clearer in the sinuses, but looser in the jaw, lighter in the chest. There's room in your breath now. She hands you a small scrap of paper, more parchment than paper, honestly, folded into a tight triangle. You open it. Inside, a list, not written in any strict order, just plants and instructions. Fever grass, boil, not steep. Ginger, pound before fire. Tamarind, only when moon is dark. A final note, no salt when angry. You raise an eyebrow. "Cooking angry spoil the cure," she says simply. "Soup feel your mood." That might be a metaphor, might not. In any case, the lesson is clear. Healing isn't just about ingredients. It's about intention. About the hand that stirs, the voice that sings, the mind that remembers to breathe while slicing root. You pocket the list as you sit under the tree once more, sipping a mild peppermint infusion that she insists is just for calm. You reflect on what you've learned, that the body speaks, that the plants reply, that sometimes the cat really is part of the ritual, and that a healer doesn't always wear a coat. That afternoon, as the light turns syrupy and the wind starts to play tricks with the hanging herbs, Miss Essie reaches for a small clay jar that smells faintly like molasses and mystery. She unscrews it with the slow reverence usually reserved for secrets, or possibly mischief. "This one," she says, dipping a spoon into the thick amber goo inside, "is cough syrup." You relax a little. That doesn't sound too intimidating. She narrows her eyes. "But also, not just cough syrup." Uh-oh. She ladles a small dollop onto a wooden spoon, hands it to you like a loaded weapon, and watches as you hesitate. "It's sweet," she adds, "but might make you remember things you weren't planning to." Great. You take it. Sticky, floral, a bit spicy. At first it tastes like honey met nutmeg on a warm afternoon. But then something shifts, a sudden bitterness like burnt orange peel, followed by a tingling sensation under your tongue. You blink, swallow, feel your eyes water slightly. Miss Essie nods with grave satisfaction. That mean it working. She turns back to the jar and begins explaining the ingredients like she's listing friends from different chapters of her life. Bissy nut for bitterness and binding. Nutmeg to warm the chest and stir the shadows, whatever that means. Allspice for heat. Honey to calm the fire. And lime juice to cut lies, which you suspect might be metaphorical, though your tongue is unsure. But there's something else in there too. Something she doesn't name. She just calls it a drop of guard. She says it's not a plant exactly, but a thing passed down. A memory, almost. A whispered blessing mixed in during the boiling. Something only a proper herb woman knows how to fold in just right. You can't taste it, but you feel it, like invisible hands smoothing your shoulders. Historians still debate whether certain herbal brews in the Caribbean, particularly those used by root doctors or OBA practitioners, were medicinal, magical, or something in between. Records from colonial observers are filled with fear, fascination, and plenty of mistranslation. Most couldn't decide if the syrups were healing people or hexing them. Miss Essie doesn't clarify either. She just shrugs. Same plants can fix or foul, she says. All depend on the mind that makes it. She places the jar back on the shelf, tucked behind a small figurine of a woman with her eyes closed and one hand raised. You suspect it's more than decoration. Then she tells you a story. Once, she says, a woman came to her with a cough that wouldn't stop. Had seen 3 doctors, tried all their tonics, none worked. Miss Essie gave her this same syrup, but not before making her confess to stealing her sister's earrings and blaming the neighbor's goat. Apparently, the syrup only worked after that. You can't hold a lie in your chest and expect the lungs to breathe right, she says, matter of fact. You nod slowly, wondering what half-truths might be crowding your own lungs. She wipes the spoon on a cloth and then begins preparing another batch. You watch as she lays out each ingredient like a priest setting up an altar. She doesn't measure with cups or spoons. She measures with memory. A pinch for that time she healed a fevered child with just soursop and lullabies. A splash for the storm night when she boiled syrup by lightning light. You realize that these aren't just ingredients. They're stories. Every herb here has a backstory. Every root has been harvested with a reason, under a sky that meant something. And then comes the nutmeg. She grates it with the kind of gentle care you'd expect from someone handling a precious heirloom. The scent rises immediately, warm, spicy, nostalgic. You remark that it smells nice. She smirks. Nutmeg, not just for cake, it carried dreams. According to island lore, nutmeg was sometimes used in small quantities to induce mild visions, or at least a dream-rich sleep. But too much, and you'd find yourself in a trance, or worse, talking to shadows that don't like being interrupted. Quirky, yes. But she insists nutmeg has its place in healing colds, not just for warming the body, but for helping you find what you lost in your breath. A phrase you still don't fully understand, but by now have stopped questioning. She continues stirring the syrup base, humming the same tune she used when she stirred the soup. You suspect it's not just a habit, it's part of the infusion. Sound is part of the medicine. And then comes the final step, sealing the jar. She pours the syrup into a fresh container, wipes the rim, and caps it with a cloth tied in red string. Not wax, not plastic, cloth and red thread, symbol of protection, of warning, of energy turned inward. She hands you the jar. Keep this close, she says. Use when your voice forget how to sound strong. It's not a dosage chart. It's a trust contract. You tuck it away in your bag, which now feels more like a travel altar than luggage. Outside, the light shifts again. A rooster calls. Somewhere nearby, a goat bleats with the urgency of someone late to something vague but important. Miss Essie lights a bit of dried orange peel and lets the smoke trail around the hut. Now we burn the words, she says softly. What words? She smiles. The ones that brought the cold. And with that, she tosses a tiny scrap of parchment into the fire. You never saw her write anything, but the smoke rises, sweet and sharp, and your breath deepens without thinking. The cat yawns again, and your lungs, they feel light. You spend the rest of the afternoon in a haze, not the fevered kind that leaves you trembling under blankets, but the good kind, the golden kind, where time feels folded and your body finally remembers how to just exist without narrating its discomfort every few minutes. Miss Essie decides it's time for the heat to leave, and for this, she has something special in mind. She leads you around the back of the hut to a small bamboo frame covered in old linens and banana leaves. It looks like a cross between a sweat lodge and a tropical blanket fort. Smoke curls from underneath, thin and fragrant. This is smoke room, she says, lifting the flap and motioning for you to crawl inside. Not fire hot, just spirit warm. You hesitate for a second. You're still mildly traumatized from that one time you sat too close to a campfire in synthetic pants, but curiosity wins. You crouch and enter, settling onto a mat of palm fronds that smell faintly of lime. Inside, the air is thick but gentle, like the inside of a teacup left steaming too long. You can make out the source of the smoke, a clay bowl filled with smoldering herbs, mostly rosemary, orange peel, and something musky you can't quite place. Miss Essie passes you a damp cloth and tells you to breathe through it if the air gets too heavy. Then she sits just outside, behind the bamboo screen, her voice filtering through like wind in reeds. This, she says, is where we sweat out what didn't want to leave with the tea. The sweat room was, and in some cases still is, a staple in Caribbean healing. Not everyone used them. Some preferred steams, some baths, but this slow roast under sacred smoke had its devotees. Enslaved people who had little access to doctors would often create similar smoke chambers using blankets, fire, and carefully chosen herbs to draw out what ailed them. Historians still argue whether these were copied from African sweat rituals, Taino steam baths, or if they emerged from necessity and shared instinct. Probably all three. Whatever the origin, the result is undeniable. Your body starts to loosen. You begin to sweat, first under your arms, then along your spine, then in that weird spot behind your knees that always forgets it exists until humidity arrives. It's not uncomfortable. In fact, it feels like being slowly returned to factory settings. Miss Essie hums softly outside, and the herbs crackle gently as the smoke dances around you. This isn't smoke meant to choke or blind. It's more like a message delivered in scent. The rosemary clears your head. The citrus lifts something from your chest. That musky, earthy note, maybe myrrh, grounds you like an invisible hand on your shoulder. And then she speaks again. Not to you this time, to whatever might still be lingering. If you're still in there, this your last chance, the door open. You don't ask who she's talking to. Some part of you knows. The heat deepens, your skin shines, your breath slows. You don't think about errands or emails or regrets. You just breathe. In, out. Like the world narrowed to this tiny bamboo space and the way the air moves through your chest. She taps the frame twice, your cue. You crawl out slowly, emerging into late afternoon light with skin glowing and hair mildly chaotic. You look like someone who has been through something and come out the other side moisturized. Miss Essie hands you a cup of cool coconut water. To cool the blood, she says. You drink it down in one go. It tastes like forgiveness. The smoke room is disassembled with care. She folds the linens, snuffs the fire with damp leaves, and thanks the herbs out loud. You follow her lead, murmuring your own little thank you to the rosemary for not frying your sinuses. The rest of the day slows. You sit in the shade while she shells peas for tomorrow's soup. You help, clumsily. She pretends not to notice the 3 peas that go rolling under the bench. The cat perches nearby, eyeing you now not with suspicion, but with bored tolerance. You take this as a spiritual upgrade. She tells you about her grandmother, a woman who could tell how long a fever would last based on the length of your sneeze, who once cured a night terror by making someone wear a sock filled with peppercorns and whisper apologies into a conch shell. Not everything makes sense, she admits, but it don't mean it don't work. You nod, because honestly, at this point, you're not sure what sense even means. But you feel better, lighter, like someone pulled a curtain back inside your ribcage and aired out the room. Miss Essie smiles, sensing the shift in you. That's the smoke, she says. It don't ask permission, it just know. Night creeps in slowly. The light turns amber, then rose, then deep blue. Frogs begin to gossip in the underbrush. Somewhere someone is singing low and slow. Maybe another healer, maybe just a tired farmer. You stretch, yawn, and Miss Essie hands you a thin roll of linen. For wrapping your feet tonight, she says. Keep the cold from sneaking back in through your toes. You chuckle, but take it. Because here, that kind of thing isn't superstition. It's just medicine with good manners. Morning arrives like a whisper. No dramatic roosters today. No choking on your own breath. Just light spilling gently across your face and the sound of Miss Essie boiling something over the fire that smells suspiciously like last night's soup, but with new ambitions. You stretch under your linen wrap. Yes, still around your feet, and to your surprise, they're warm. Like content warm. No chills creeping up your ankles, no mysterious foot sweat, just warmth. You shuffle outside, half awake, nose dry for the first time in days. Miss Essie greets you without turning. You slept like the yam, she says. You blink. That good? She shrugs. Yam don't worry about things. Fair enough. She hands you a bowl of soup. Breakfast? Of course. Jamaican mornings in the 18th century often began with something hearty, pigeon pea soup, salted fish stew, or a broth rich with yam and thyme. There were no smoothies, no overnight oats, just fuel, warm, slow, and steeped in intention. You sit quietly and sip. The Scotch bonnet is more playful this morning, less of a throat punch, more of a tickle. The thyme dances, and you swear you taste cinnamon. Could be your imagination, could also be another of Miss Essie's unlisted ingredients. After the last spoonful, she begins her next ritual. She lays out 3 items, a piece of salted fish, a twist of callaloo leaves, and a small gourd filled with white powder. Salt maybe, maybe not. This, she says, is how we feed the balance. You blink because you just ate, but she's not talking about you. She's talking about everything. The air, the fire, the spirits, the memory of your ancestors still lingering around the hut like nosy old neighbors. She places the food in a calabash bowl and sets it on a flat stone near the mango tree, sprinkles the powder around it, muttering quietly in patois. You catch a few words: peace, rest, return. The ceremony is simple, but specific. A little fish, a little green, a little offering. It's part of a practice that blends African cosmology with Caribbean ecology and a splash of ancestral micromanagement. In some communities, this was seen as appeasement, a way to keep wandering spirits from messing with your lungs or tying your tongue in dreams. In others, it was pure maintenance, just good spiritual hygiene, like brushing your soul's teeth. Historians still argue whether these rites were meant for actual spirits or served more as psychological grounding. But the effect remains. The person performing them always walks away looking a little lighter. Miss Essie turns back towards you. Now we talk about food. You pause, bowl in hand. We haven't been talking about food, she chuckles. We've been talking about soup. That different. She begins listing foods that keep the chill from inside out. Boiled green banana, breadfruit roasted over coals, saltfish steamed with thyme and scallion, and of course the unsung hero of the 18th century Jamaican sick room, cassava porridge. Cassava feeds your bones, she says, but too much make you dull. You laugh, then stop. She's serious. Everything, she explains, has its role. Food is medicine, but food is also a vibe. If you eat too much grounding food when your spirit needs lightning, you'll feel slow, heavy. If you eat too many lift-up past foods when you're already floating in grief or anxiety, you'll drift too far. This is not calorie counting. This is soul sorting. She opens a basket and shows you some of the ingredients she plans to prepare for others later. Pumpkin slices, soursop leaves, dried turmeric root, and a twist of lemongrass stalks tied like a bow. You ask who they're for. She shrugs. Someone who's gonna come later. They always do. The knowledge that someone out there is already sick, already heading this way, somehow doesn't feel ominous, just part of the rhythm. She begins grating coconut by hand, the scraping sound oddly soothing. You offer to help. She side-eyes you. You got enough strength to scrape? She challenges. You roll up your sleeve. I scraped a mango once. She laughs like you've just said the punchline to a joke she forgot she liked. And so, under Miss Essie's watchful eye, you grate coconut. It's harder than it looks. But the rhythm, scrape, pause, shift, scrape, is meditative. After a while, you don't even notice your sniffles. You just breathe and move. The cat sits nearby, tail curled around its body, occasionally flicking its ear in approval. You get the feeling this is the highest compliment it offers. Once the coconut is grated, she adds it to a small pot with warm water and stirs gently, letting the milk rise. This, she says, will be mixed with cinnamon and a pinch of salt for a mid-morning tonic. It don't fight the cold, she says. It just reminds your body it's not in danger. That hits you. Because somewhere deep inside, your body has been acting like it's under siege. Every sneeze felt like an alarm. Every cough like a collapse. But now you sip this warm coconut cinnamon mixture, and something inside exhales. She sits with you while you drink, says nothing, just peels a guava with a knife so sharp it could split a hair in midair. The quiet isn't awkward, it's sacred. And as you sit together, sick but healing, tired but not broken, surrounded by steam, herbs, offerings, and gentle cat judgment, you realize something. You're not just recovering from a cold, you're recovering from forgetting how to listen. You don't mean to mention the dream. It just slips out between sips of coconut tonic as Miss Essie reaches for a bundle of dried lemongrass hanging from the rafters. You say it like a joke, hoping she'll laugh it off. Last night I dreamed something was sitting on my chest. Like, actually sitting. Heavy. She freezes. Not dramatically. Just enough to let you know this is not something we chuckle over. Her head turns slowly. How heavy? You blink? Like a sack of yams? She nods, then mutters something under her breath and tosses the lemongrass bundle from one hand to the other. Duppy. You blink again. You dream a duppy was sitting on you. Means it was. Probably still trying. You set your bowl down very carefully. Duppy, in Jamaican folklore, can mean a ghost, yes, but more specifically, a mischievous or malevolent spirit, often tied to unfinished business or neglected ritual. There are friendly ones too, but the ones that sit on people's chests in dreams, not the friendly kind. You feel a chill crawl over your shoulders. Miss Essie doesn't seem surprised. She moves quickly now, grabbing items with the same no-nonsense energy she applies to soup preparation. A chunk of camphor, a twist of black thread, a small bottle with what looks like ash and bay leaf steeped in rum. She places them on the ground like chess pieces. Sometimes colds come from duppy, she says. Not germs, not wind, not too much rain, just spirit that overstayed its welcome. You nod like this is completely normal, which by now it sort of is. She begins to prepare a rubbing salve, not the sweet-smelling kind with coconut and mint. This one smells sharp, acrid, like old vinegar and something burnt. You remove your shirt without being asked. There's no modesty in healing, apparently. She begins rubbing the salve into your back with firm, practiced hands. Her touch is not aggressive, but it's not exactly gentle either. It feels like she's convincing your muscles to give up secrets they didn't know they were keeping. She hums again, this time a different tune. Slower, lower, a little mournful. You feel it in your bones before you hear it in your ears. And then she begins to speak, not to you, but to the duppy. If you hear, you know you're not invited, she murmurs, rubbing in slow circles along your spine. This body warm now, this soul watching now, you don't belong. She picks up the camphor and rubs a small dab behind your ears, then presses her thumb to the center of your forehead. You feel pressure, not painful, just insistent. Dreams are doors, she explains. Some open too easy when the body tired. She doesn't ask what else you saw in the dream. She doesn't need to. According to many Afro-Caribbean traditions, dreams are events, not figments. What happens in dreams leaves residue, and when a duppy sits on your chest, that's a sign your defenses were low. Your breath, your life force was being muffled, and colds? Well, that's just the body's way of panicking. Historians still puzzle over how such beliefs coexisted with more Western models of disease. But in rural 18th century Jamaica, most folks weren't asking whether germs or ghosts caused illness. They were preparing for both. Miss Essie lights a scrap of cloth soaked in the camphor mixture. It flares quickly, then smolders. She waves the smoke around your head and torso. Breathe it in, deep. You do. It stings slightly, like inhaling bravery. She takes the thread and loops it 3 times around your left wrist, tying a knot so tight it could hold up a canoe. This is a watch knot, she says. You keep it on till it falls off by itself. You ask what happens if it never falls off. Then you got good balance, she grins. The mood lightens slightly. She pours you a small shot of something that smells like ginger, sugarcane, and confrontation. You sip. It burns like honesty going down. You cough. She laughs. That one for chasing. The duppy cleansing isn't over, though. Not yet. She tells you to take a walk around the hut, clockwise, slowly, 3 times. As you walk, you're to repeat, breath is mine, me body is closed, me sleep is clean. You do as instructed, voice low, pace steady. The earth beneath your feet feels firmer somehow. The air, less clingy. On the 3rd round, Miss Essie throws a pinch of something over your shoulder. You're told not to look back. You don't. Back at the hut, she hands you a fresh cloth. This one smells faintly of eucalyptus and lime zest. You press it to your chest. It warms instantly. That one seal you, she says. Now no more duppy in your sleep. The relief that washes over you isn't dramatic. It's quiet, like someone closing a window during a storm. The cat yawns again, clearly unbothered by the whole ordeal. You lie down near the fire, wrap yourself in the same blanket as last night, and feel something inside you realign. Not just your lungs, not just your mood, but your edges. And for the first time in days, when you blink slowly into drowsiness, you know, tonight, nothing's sitting on your chest but breath. The next morning arrives with the scent of chili oil and ground pimento. Not a breakfast you'd expect, unless, of course, you're still living in the domain of Miss Essie, where every part of the body has its own flavor profile, and even your elbows get their own rub. You step outside and find her waiting with a small wooden bowl. Inside, a thick reddish-brown paste that glistens in the morning sun. She stirs it lazily with her finger, then pats the bench next to her. Time for rubbing. You blink. Again? She looks you dead in the eye. The cold may be leaving, but your body still needs reminding. Apparently, rubbing isn't just a one-time feel-good experience. It's a ritual, a re-education, a sensory way of telling your limbs, you are safe now. You sit. She dips 2 fingers into the bowl and begins at your shoulders, pressing and circling with that same quiet strength. The paste is warm, first from the sun, then from whatever's in it. You smell allspice, maybe a hint of cinnamon, and the unmistakable sharpness of raw Scotch bonnet. You flinch slightly. Good, she murmurs. Mean your fire waking up. Rubbing, in many Caribbean folk traditions, wasn't just about sore muscles. It was medicinal, spiritual, diagnostic, and even disciplinary. Some believed a good rub could shake off bad dreams, neutralize curses, or chase away the kind of melancholy that brewed in the bones when rain wouldn't stop falling. Historians still argue whether rubbing was more therapeutic than symbolic, but no one denies its importance. Children were rubbed after baths. Old people were rubbed before bed. Sick people, especially those with fever, cold, or cough, got rubbed in silence, in prayer, in song. Miss Essie doesn't sing this time, but she does hum. Something rhythmic and slow, a lullaby meant not for sleep, but for return. She moves from shoulders to chest, avoiding your ticklish ribs like someone who's done this 1,000 times. The pressure is just enough to make your muscles melt without complaint. Then comes the back, where apparently your stress has been living rent-free. She kneads gently at first, then deeper, finding knots you didn't even know existed. One particularly stubborn spot makes you gasp. She pauses. That's the part where your yes lived when you meant no. You don't respond, mostly because she's right. Then, without ceremony, she lifts your foot and begins rubbing the sole. You yelp. She cackles. You walk round all day acting strong, but your feet know the truth. You endure the massage. The chili oil heats your skin until it feels like someone slipped a warm coal between your toes, but in a strangely comforting way. She explains that in her tradition, the feet are last to be rubbed because they're furthest from the head, which means they get ignored, which means they hold on to everything you thought you left behind. Rubbing them, she says, tells the body, you've arrived, you're here, you're whole again. You don't question it. She finishes with a final swipe of pimento oil along your spine, her palm lingering there for a beat longer than usual. Now, she says, no cold dare come back, not without knocking. You laugh? She doesn't. The rub leaves you flushed and relaxed, like your whole body just exhaled. There's a pleasant tingle along your limbs, a feeling you'd chase if you knew how to bottle it. She gives you the bowl of leftover paste, now half empty. Use tonight, she says. Right before bed. Rub your chest, left to right. Don't cross your heart. You don't ask why. She tosses the cloth she used into a steaming basin and begins scrubbing it with soap made from coconut ash and lime peel. While she works, she tells you a story. Once, she rubbed a man who claimed he'd been cursed by his own mother-in-law. Every night he'd sweat profusely, even in the cool months. Doctors said it was tropical malaise. Miss Essie called it guilt. She rubbed his chest for 3 nights while he confessed all his misdeeds, mostly involving rum, bad gambling, and worse apologies. By the 4th morning, the sweating stopped, and so did the card playing. She shrugs. Sometimes the rub loosened more than mucus. You're starting to believe her. Later that day, she hands you a small jar of the rub paste, now cooled and wrapped in brown paper. For travel, she says, in case the world make your body forget again. You thank her, and she nods like you're finally beginning to understand something she's been trying to teach you since day one. Before dinner, she lets you do the rubbing. Not on her, don't panic, but on a bundle of fresh cassava root she plans to boil for tomorrow's breakfast. She tells you to rub the skin with lime and salt first to wake it up. To wake it up. It's silly. It's serious. It's both. You do it carefully, talking to the root under your breath like it's a shy child or an old friend you haven't seen in years. And Miss Essie watches, satisfied. Because sometimes healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's chili oil between your shoulder blades. Sometimes it's the slow heat of a touch that says, you made it through. And sometimes it's learning to rub a root, like it holds the last truth you forgot to say out loud. By the time evening seeps into the leaves and the light turns that soft shade of indigo that makes shadows friendly, Miss Essie is back at her table with a bowl of something that looks alive. Not literally, but the leaves seem to shiver as she picks them up, as if they know they're being used. You ease into the bench beside her, still smelling faintly like peppery foot ointment, and ask the question that's been on your mind for days. How do you know what the plants want? She doesn't answer at first, just keeps plucking stems, arranging them into tidy little bundles that wouldn't look out of place in a bouquet if the bouquet were destined to be boiled, crushed, or smoked. Finally, she says, they talk, but not with mouth. Okay, you wait for a joke, one of her crooked grins, but her expression is calm, reverent. Plant don't shout, it hum, she adds. If you too noisy, you miss it. She taps the side of your head with a knuckle. This too full. Gotta listen with this. And then she taps the center of your chest. You look down at the pile she's working through, leaves of guava, broadleaf thyme, sweet basil, and something long and red-veined you haven't seen before. She picks up the last one and smiles. This one speak loud, she says. Only grow where spirit is strong. Won't even root if the house wrong. You raise an eyebrow. The house has to be right? She nods. Some places too proud, or too sad. Plant don't like sad walls. Historians still puzzle over the way traditional herbalists claim to receive knowledge from plants, particularly those with no formal training. Some chalk it up to keen observation, learned intuition. Others lean toward the mystical. But to Miss Essie, it's just relationship. She explains that when her grandmother began teaching her as a child, the first lesson wasn't boiling or brewing. It was silence. She'd have to sit in the bush for hours, saying nothing, just watching the wind move through leaves, listening to roots crack when it rained. You sit still long enough, she says, the plants start asking you questions. You try to imagine your mint plant at home interrogating you about your life choices. Hard to picture. But in this hut, it makes perfect sense. She opens a wooden box next. Inside, bundles of dried leaves wrapped in twine, each labeled not with names, but with feelings. There's one marked Soft Return, one called River Quiet. Another simply reads For the Throat That Stopped Singing. You reach for that last one, and she gently pulls your hand away. Not for today, she says. That one's only for sorrow with teeth. You don't ask what that means. You just nod, like someone who's been warned not to touch an electric fence by someone with impressive burn scars. Instead, she hands you a bundle labeled Clear Shadow, tells you to unwrap it and place the contents into a small pouch lined with crushed charcoal and bits of cassia bark. These go under your bed, she explains. They ask the spirit world to stay outside your lungs tonight. You glance at the leaves, thin, dry, slightly curled, yet still holding a deep green. You smell them. They carry something cool, almost minty, but with a bite. She says the plant grows only after the second rain of the season. Never before. Never after. It's stubborn. It waits. You ever wait for something so long you forget what you're waiting for? She asks, more to the air than to you. You nod. She adds the last ingredient to the pouch, a tiny pebble, smooth and dark, flecked with a white vein. Not a plant, not an herb, just a rock. It listens better than people, she says. Don't interrupt. Then she closes the pouch, ties it with a knot that looks simple until you try to replicate it later, and fail. This isn't just about fighting colds anymore. This is about staying whole, about remembering your place in a world where not everything is solved with pills or boiling water. Some things need witnessing. Some things need a plant that only hums when you're ready to hear it. She hands you the pouch, heavy for its size. Put this under your pillow. If you dream of wind, don't worry. That just means your breath is finding its shape again. You nod and tuck it into your pocket like something sacred. Before you can ask what else she has growing, she beckons you outside, leads you to a plot near the hut, a wild, lopsided garden full of things that should not grow together. Ginger tangling with aloe, basil flirting with turmeric, and in the center, a tree so crooked it looks like it grew while dodging gossip. This one, she says, pointing to it, talks all night. You lean close. Nothing. Silence. She smiles. It don't talk to people who want to hear. It talk to people who need to. You back away respectfully. The stars are peeking out now. Crickets tuning their instruments. A gentle hum returns to the earth. You've been rubbed, smoked, fed, whispered to, and now you're being taught. Not with lectures, not with facts, but with roots, leaves, things that grow in silence. And as you sit there, watching her water a plant using leftover tea, murmuring a little song as she pours, you feel it, the hum. Maybe not in your ears, but definitely in your chest. Miss Essie doesn't get angry often. At least, not the kind of anger that raises voices or slams things. But tonight, when she opens a crumpled parchment handed to her by a breathless teenage boy from the nearby village, her mouth tightens like it's biting a sour guava. You lean in. She lets you read over her shoulder. It's a notice, printed, proper, sealed in colonial wax. A decree, signed by the governor, stating that the practice of unlicensed bush remedies, charms, or superstitious ministrations is hereby forbidden and punishable by fine, confinement, or hard labor. You glance at her. That's about you. She snorts, crumples the paper, and tosses it into the fire. You wait. She doesn't say anything, just stirs a pot with more force than usual. Then finally, this again. Turns out this isn't the first time, nor the fifth. In the 18th century, colonial governments across the Caribbean regularly tried to outlaw or suppress African-derived healing practices. Sometimes they were framed as health risks, other times as potential insurrection tools. Because let's be honest, nothing makes an oppressor nervous like enslaved people learning to heal themselves, to protect themselves, to organize in the shadows with herbs and whispered prayers. The laws often blurred the lines between medicine and rebellion. Healing, after all, could be political, especially when the hands doing it weren't white or formally trained. Historians still debate the exact motives behind these bans. Was it about medical control, spiritual panic, or simple fear of anything that couldn't be neatly explained in English? Probably all of the above. You ask if she's scared. She stares into the fire. I've been healing longer than they've been writing, she says, and longer still than they've been afraid. She begins packing bundles. Not to flee, no, to deliver. Even tonight, even with laws looming like smoke, she's preparing cures for families too scared to come in person. A tea for a coughing child. A root bath for someone who hasn't spoken since the last storm. A pouch for a woman whose dreams are too loud. They'll send soldiers, she says flatly. Again, but they always get sick after eating foreign food. One night in the bush and they come running for tea. You smile. You shouldn't, but you do. She rolls up another bundle, this one wrapped in banana leaf and tied with green thread. This one, she says, handing it to you, is for the man who sent that letter. You blink. You're sending medicine to the governor? She nods. His daughter got the cough, been wheezing all night. His servant girl comes here when she can. You can't tell if that's defiance or the world's most impressive flex. Maybe both. She pours a bottle of reddish-brown liquid into a cork jar and seals it with wax made from tree resin and crushed lemongrass. These laws, she mutters, they paper, but I'm root. It's a sentence that sticks. You help her arrange the bundles in her basket, each one labeled not with names, but with symbols. A circle for lung problems, a wavy line for sleep issues, a dot under a crescent for people who've been followed. She teaches you the marks as you go. You memorize them without trying. Later that night, she sits at the edge of her bed, leafing through her grandmother's old book again. She points to a page that's been rubbed thin at the corners. The ink is faded, but you can still make out symbols, moon phases, notes scrawled in 3 different handwritings. They tried to burn this once, she says. You raise an eyebrow. She nods. Back when my mother's still walking. They said it was dangerous knowledge. She said it was bread. She gently flips the page, a diagram of a tree, roots drawn bigger than the trunk. At the bottom a phrase, what is deep can't be moved by wind. You ask if she ever considered leaving, going somewhere safer. She looks at you like you've asked if mangoes can swim. This is the work, she says. Not the comfort. You don't press. She's already said more than most. Outside, a drum begins in the distance. Slow, steady, not festive, more like a heartbeat. Someone, somewhere, is marking time. Miss Essie listens for a while, then rises, places a protective hand over her jars, her tools, her book. They can't outlaw breath, she says, and then she blows out the candle. The room slips into darkness, except for the faint glow of embers and the distant rhythm of drums, drumming for lungs that still remember how to breathe free. Morning light creeps into the hut like it's trying not to wake anyone. The fire is out, the cat is still a puddle of fur on the bench, and Miss Essie is already at her table, hunched over a faded notebook that looks like it's been through at least 3 hurricanes and a heartbreak. She beckons you closer without looking up. "Come," she says. "Today you read." You shuffle over, still groggy, still wrapped in the strange sense of clarity that only herbal steam and mild spiritual haunting can produce. She pushes the notebook toward you and taps it gently. "This me grandmother's book, and her mother's, and hers." You open it slowly. It smells like age and clove. The pages are uneven, hand-cut, browned at the edges. Some have been patched with thin cloth. Others are stuck together with syrup stains, pressed flowers, or something that may once have been mashed yam. Inside, spells, recipes, lullabies, warnings. Diagrams drawn in charcoal. Words written phonetically, some in patois, some in what looks like a mix of Creole shorthand and pictograms. There's a page titled "Feed to Dry Nose" with a sketch of a pepper bush beside a steaming bowl. Another simply says, "Keep this from men who dream too loud." You look up. "Did you write any of this?" Miss Essie shrugs. "Just added what I learned, but most of it was given." Historians rarely mention these books. Not because they weren't important, but because they weren't visible. They weren't printed. They weren't kept in libraries. They lived in tin boxes under beds, in mango wood cupboards, or sewn into the lining of skirts. They were protected like babies, or bombs. You flip to a page where the writing is slanted and messy, like someone writing mid-fever. It's a recipe for breath balm, which includes boiled onion skin, cassava leaf, and the instruction, "Whisper before stirring, not too fast." You ask what happens if you stir too fast, she smirks. Then the breath don't trust you. She has you read another section aloud. It's harder than it looks. The phonetics are unfamiliar, the Creole is thick, and the symbols keep appearing between words like punctuation from another world. One recipe says, "Cool de chest, boil sweet basil, mash with water yam, rub underarm at night, not on Friday, never Friday." You raise an eyebrow. "Why not Friday?" She taps her temple. "Fridays when spirits roam wide. They smell yam and follow you home." Again, not asking more questions. You're learning. She lets you copy a page into your own little notebook, a modern thing with clean lines and crisp pages that feel almost rude beside her heirloom. Still, you do it slowly, carefully, as if the act of writing is part of the spell. While you copy, she tells you how the book came to her, not with a ceremony, but in a moment of grief. Her mother, on her final day, gave it without speaking, just placed it in Miss Essie's lap and closed her eyes. It was heavy then, she says, not from weight, from waiting. Waiting for what? For someone ready to add more. You pause in your copying. She tells you how some entries aren't words at all, just drawings. One is a bowl with 3 ripples, another a pair of bare feet next to a pepper tree. These are memory markers, she explains. Triggers for stories that can't be written down, only spoken. Only passed when the fire is just right and the person listening knows how to forget what shouldn't be repeated. Some entries are songs. She hums one now, so softly you almost miss it. A rhythm about cassava peeling and the way salt should be thrown toward the sun, not away. She doesn't say why. The melody sticks to your ribs. She points to a blank page near the back. "This one waiting for you." You blink. She nods. "Write what you learned Buddhas do, not what you think you learned." No pressure then. You sit quietly, trying to think. What have you learned? That guinea hen weed tastes like betrayal? That dreams can bring duppies? That nutmeg is one sassy spoonful away from a vision quest? Maybe. But what you write finally is simple. When the breath returns, don't scare it away by talking too fast. She peeks over your shoulder, reads it and smiles. "That page not blank no more," she says. Later, she carefully folds a small cloth pouch and slides the book inside, along with a dried hibiscus petal and a sliver of charcoal. She wraps the bundle in a strip of banana leaf and ties it shut with green thread. "Take this," she says, "your piece of the book." You hold it like a fragile truth. The sun is climbing now, and the breeze smells like mangoes and old rain. You sit quietly, feeling the strange weight of inherited knowledge on your lap. And you realize Miss Essie isn't just a healer, she's a library, and today you borrowed a page. The fever hits the neighbor girl just after nightfall. Her name is Myra, 11 years old, with big eyes and a laugh that usually rings through the trees like something bottled and sweet. But tonight, no laughter, just a soft whimper through the dark and the pounding rhythm of feet slapping the ground as her uncle comes running. Miss Essie is already lacing her sandals. She been shaking, the uncle says, breath hitching. Burning up. Ain't drank all day. She talking things. Don't make sense. You grab the pouch of remedies. You don't even have to ask anymore. You just move. It's a short walk through brush and humming silence. The moon, fat and slow above, seems to understand it's not the time for shine. It keeps itself modest behind a veil of clouds. Myra's house is little more than a square room with a thatch roof and kindness in the corners. You enter behind Miss Essie, who moves like someone stepping into a sacred place. Because she is. The girl lies on a thin mat, hair stuck to her forehead, breath fast and shallow. Her mother wrings a rag with shaking hands. She just started burning. Couldn't wake her. Miss Essie kneels without speaking. She places one hand on Myra's chest, then her forehead, then lifts her left foot gently. She been holding something, she murmurs. Not to the mother, not to you, to someone, maybe the house, maybe Myra herself. You watch, silent, like a student or an apprentice. Which, let's face it, you are now. She opens her bag, pulls out a gourd, a bundle of thyme, a dark root you've seen before but still don't know by name, and a vial of the cough syrup. Yes, the one that tasted like secrets and burnt citrus. She pours a spoonful and dabs it onto Myra's lips, just enough to coat. Then she turns to the mother. She dreamed last night? The mother hesitates, said she saw her cousin in the yard, the one who passed. Miss Essie nods slowly. He was carrying something? The mother gasps. A basket. You don't say anything. You just watch as Miss Essie begins to work. She rolls Myra onto her side gently and rubs the root under her arms, behind her knees, along the base of her neck. Not fast, not hard, like she's smoothing fabric or coaxing something out of hiding. Then comes the steam. A small pot is set over hot coals, water, thyme, guava leaves, a piece of orange peel, and something powdered. When it boils, she pours it into a basin and places it near the girl's feet, covers them with a cloth to trap the rising vapor. Don't fight the sweat, she says. In the old days, before colonial clinics and bitter white powders, fever dreams were treated with this blend of physical and spiritual intervention. Not just cool cloths and broth, but herbs to draw out the heat from where it hides, often in the corners of the soul. Historians still debate whether these practices shortened fevers or merely soothed the caregivers, but those who lived through them rarely forgot them. Myra starts murmuring. Her arms twitch, her legs shift. She chasing it, Miss Essie says. Let her run. And then the song begins. A lullaby. Quiet, low. No words at first, just tone, vibration. You've heard her hum before, but this is different. This one reaches further, deeper. She sings about water and mango trees and a hammock that never breaks. She sings about night and wind and the way a mother's hand feels when it checks your forehead in the dark. Myra's breath begins to slow. Her body slackens. And finally, her eyes open. Just a crack. Just enough. Miss Essie gives her a sip of coconut water. Not much. Just enough for the throat to remember how to swallow. The fever hasn't broken yet, but it has loosened. She turns to the mother. She'll sleep now. Watch her breath, not her eyes. You help pack the herbs back up. You don't need direction. You know where they go. Before you leave, Miss Essie takes a small pouch from her pocket, filled with crushed leaf, a pinch of salt, and a pebble, and slips it under Myra's mat. For the thing she was carrying, she says. The mother whispers, thank you, like it's a prayer. Back at the hut, you don't speak for a while. Miss Essie finally breaks the silence. Some colds don't come from weather, she says. Some come from what we try to carry for others. You nod? She sits on her stool, removes her sandals, and exhales like someone who's held her breath for hours. She'll be all right, she adds. The fever just needed to hear its name sung. You sit beside her, and for the first time, you feel like more than a visitor. You feel like someone being woven into the fabric of something ancient. Not just medicine, but memory. The day after Myra's fever scare begins slow and tender, like the island itself is tiptoeing. You wake to the sound of Miss Essie grinding something in a mortar, the rhythmic thump-thump scrape of stone on root. She sees you stirring and smiles. Time for you to learn the work. You sit up, body a little sore from the smoke room, the rubbing, the dreams, and perhaps from carrying a slightly more awakened soul than yesterday. Still, you nod. Ready. You apprenticing now. She says, matter of fact, only way to keep what you've been given is to pass it later. There's no ceremony, no blessing, just a task. First lesson, coconut spoon. She hands you one, smooth and worn with use. Not every herb want knife, she explains. Some need to be coaxed, not cut. You begin with lemongrass, soft, forgiving. You scrape gently along the grain, letting the oils rise slowly under your fingertips. The smell is immediate and calming, like a nap on a porch in late afternoon. She watches, nods, approves. The second lesson is more complex. She gives you a bundle of dried leaves tied with blue thread. Guess what it's for, she says. You sniff. Bitter, smoky, something else, almost metallic. Throat, you guess. She smiles. Close. But no, that one's for when someone can't stop saying sorry. You blink. That's a thing? Sorry can get stuck in the bones, she says. Some people apologize for existing. That make them sick. This isn't just about physical illness anymore. Hasn't been for a while, if you're honest. These cures aren't merely for lungs or skin or joints. They're for memory, for patterns, for guilt too old to name. Historians often overlook the apprenticeship process in herbal traditions, especially those passed between women. There were no certificates, no diplomas, just trust and time. Your next task is brewing a soft heat tea, not one to fight a fever, but to encourage a low warmth in the belly, the kind that soothes grief and reminds the body it belongs to itself. She instructs you, 1 crushed clove, a finger of ginger, grated slow, 2 basil leaves, only if they come willingly, water that sat in moonlight or at least didn't rush to boil. You follow each step like it's a song. When it's done, she takes a sip. Nods. That'll do. She adds a splash of coconut milk, hands you the cup. Now drink your own cure. It's a strange feeling, knowing you made something medicinal, something that wasn't just ingredients, but intention. And it works. Your stomach loosens, your shoulders soften, even your thoughts seem to find better footing. Next, she teaches you to wrap leaves for sleeping. Not everyone like tea, she says. Some need to carry the cure and dream. You take a banana leaf, lay it flat. Add dried sweetwood bark, crushed star anise, and a drop of lime oil. You roll it gently, then wrap it with thread taken from a threadbare scarf, because memory helps the herbs remember their purpose. She tucks it into your pocket. For tonight, she says, there's no praise, just progress. Later, a neighbor stops by. An old woman with a cough that sounds like she swallowed a crow. She sits, doesn't speak, just hands Miss Essie a small coin and places her palm over her chest. Miss Essie nods. Still grief? The woman nods. She gestures to you. My apprentice gonna help today. You freeze. The woman smiles. Your hands are already sweaty, but you do it. You rub the salve she taught you on the woman's back. Press gently between the shoulder blades. Circle clockwise near the lungs. Whisper, breathe here. The woman sighs, deep and low. When she leaves, she touches your cheek like someone saying thank you without words. Miss Essie says nothing, but you catch the slight twitch at the corner of her mouth. That night, you wrap your own dream pouch, just as she taught you. You place it under your pillow and lay down, eyes wide, thoughts soft, and you dream. Not of spirits, not of cold. You dream of roots, of leaves whispering your name, of Miss Essie, younger, sitting on the same bench, learning from another pair of hands. And in the dream, you are not watching her. You are her. By dawn, you're already awake. Not groggy, not stumbling, just present. Like your body finally got the memo that it doesn't need to panic anymore. You stretch under the mosquito net, push the dream pouch gently aside, and sit up to find Miss Essie staring out into the trees, sipping something that smells like roasted rice and rainwater. She doesn't look over, just says, cold season start early this year. You step outside, and the air confirms it. Crisp for Jamaica. A breath of mountain chill wrapped in salt breeze, brushing over your skin like a polite warning. The chickens are quieter, the trees more still. Even the cat, for once, is sitting upright, as if expecting something. Come, Miss Essie says. You need to see what survival looked like. She walks slowly, basket in hand, to the edge of the estate road, where sugarcane once grew thick and fast under hands that didn't volunteer. The fields are quieter now, less brutal, but the memory lingers. She doesn't speak of it, but she walks like someone who's been watched her whole life. Cold season doesn't mean snow. It means coughs. It means damp corners and shivering children. It means families pressing their foreheads together under one blanket and waiting for fever to pass like a slow-moving rain cloud. In 1702, when she was a girl, Miss Essie says the cold season killed more people than yellow fever. Not because it was stronger, but because it was ignored. They don't listen to the wind, she mutters. That's how it get in. You visit 3 homes before breakfast. The first, a single mother with twins, both sneezing in harmony. Miss Essie hands over a bundle of orange peel and mint and instructs her to boil it under a wet cloth, place it in the crib corner, and whisper the baby names backward. Why backward, you ask later. She shrugs, to confuse the cold, trick it into leaving. The second, a man who hasn't stood in 3 days. He grunts when he sees her, half ashamed, half relieved. She sits beside him without judgment, lays a compress of basil, garlic, and sweet bay across his chest, and whispers something that sounds suspiciously like a hymn. The third, a young girl with nosebleeds and cracked lips. Miss Essie gives her a tiny sliver of aloe and instructs her mother to soak her feet in yam water before sunset. Each visit takes less than 15 minutes. No fees, no forms, just presence, ingredients, eye contact. She doesn't write anything down, you whisper as you help carry a fresh bundle of cassava. She doesn't need to, someone says behind you. It's an old man from the village carrying an armful of dried guava leaves. She remembers for all of us. You return to the hut in silence. Even the birds seem to hush now. The cold is coming, not like a storm, but like a memory returning. Everyone can feel it. That evening, she makes a big pot. The big pot, reserved for when the whole community is sniffling. In go yams, thyme, scotch bonnet, onions, and a long piece of dry bark you've never seen before. What's that? You ask. She hesitates. It's for holding hope. You wait for clarification. She stirs instead. The scent rises like a warm chant. People begin to arrive, quietly, respectfully, bearing gifts. A piece of breadfruit, a bag of rice. One woman just brings a song. They sit in a circle, sip the soup, speak low. It's not just a meal. It's a meeting, a collective inhalation. You pass out ladles of warmth and tuck a few herbs into cloth napkins for later. You don't even notice how natural it feels. And then someone asks, how do you know it's working? Miss Essie doesn't blink. You feel your breath move again, and it don't sound like goodbye. No one responds, but everyone nods. That night, you sit by the fire. She passes you a folded cloth. What's this, you ask? Your own blend, she says, for when I'm not here. It smells like everything and nothing. A little mint, a little thyme, maybe a note of your own sweat. You clutch it, not tightly, just with intention. Outside, the cold presses in again, but this time you don't flinch. You have soup in your belly, smoke in your lungs, and a teacher who taught you that survival isn't about fighting the cold. It's about warming from the inside out. Tonight is your last night here. You haven't said anything out loud, but the house knows. Miss Essie certainly does. The way she swept the corners this morning with a little more care than usual, the way she stirred the tea kettle counterclockwise just once before letting it boil. Even the cat has been circling your packed bundle like it's planning a silent protest. You'd think it would be the usual farewell rituals, a goodbye hug, a few solemn nods. But here, goodbyes are gentler, softer. They arrive through teacups left out just a little longer, through a spoonful of chest rub slid into your satchel without comment, through a glance held one heartbeat longer than normal. The night is quiet. The kind of quiet that buzzes softly in your ear, not with tension, but with the awareness that something is shifting, and no one wants to disturb it. Miss Essie sits across the fire from you, her hair wrapped in its usual cloth, her eyes steady but not unkind. She's peeling cassava in her lap, and the sound of the skin falling into the wooden bowl feels almost ceremonial. She doesn't look up when she speaks. You slept well last night? You nod? No dreams, no duppies, not even a cough. She gives a slow smile. Then the medicine listened. The fire crackles. The moon is a thin coin in the sky. The smell of roasted pimento clings to the evening air like a memory. She rises, returns with something wrapped in cloth, your notebook. The one you began in her kitchen, hands still clumsy from fever, eyes still foggy from nights of shallow breath. She places it in your lap, then wordlessly sets her book down beside it. You've seen it before, held it even. But this is different. She opens to a blank page near the back. This one's yours. You blink. For what? For what you now carry. You hesitate. The fire pops. The cassava peels shift slightly in the bowl. Then you write. You don't overthink it. You let your hand move like it remembers things your mind hasn't caught up to yet. You think of Myra, of her trembling breath, and the lullaby Miss Essie sang without words. You think of the rubbing, the warmth that came not from the herbs but from the presence. You think of the cold that never quite started in your chest, but in the silence you lived with too long. And you write. Some sicknesses begin in the breath, but some begin in the forgetting. The cure is remembering with your whole body. You finish. She doesn't read it right away, just folds the page gently with the back of her hand. Then she closes the book and holds it to her chest for a moment. That page will stay safe, she says, even when you far. You sit together for a long time. No more tea, no more lessons, just the shared rhythm of two people who both understand that what was passed between you was never meant to stay in words alone. Eventually, she stands and gestures for you to follow. She takes a lantern and leads you through the trees to the whisper tree one last time. The path is almost familiar now, worn by your feet over nights of asking and learning and unlearning. The leaves rustle gently, not dramatic, not cinematic, just a soft hush, like pages turning themselves. At the base of the tree, a small bowl has been placed. You didn't see who did it. It just appeared, the way certain things do here. It's filled with warm water, a few hibiscus petals, and a curl of sweet basil floating like a lazy question. She kneels. You kneel. She dips her fingers in, touches the water to your forehead, then your palms, then your feet. This is for keeping only what is yours. She doesn't say more. She doesn't need to. You close your eyes, and in that moment, every night you spent here, sick, sweating, laughing, learning, humming, stirring, rubbing, peeling, writing, breathing, rushes into the quiet space between your ribs like a familiar breath finally returned from a long journey. When you open your eyes again, she's holding out a small bundle. It's the coconut spoon, the one she said wasn't ready for you yet. It's been cleaned, polished, wrapped in cloth with a strip of green thread that still smells faintly of ginger oil. You take it. She says simply, use it for what you don't rush. That's the only instruction she gives. The walk back is silent. The moon climbs higher. You notice the chickens have all settled. Even the frogs seem to be taking the night off. At the hut, your pack is waiting, packed and neat. Beside it, a folded note written on old paper. You don't open it yet. Something tells you it isn't for tonight. You lay down for the last time. The mat crinkles familiarly under your weight. The pillow smells of time and clay. The air is still but not stagnant. It moves like something aware of your presence, like it's saying goodbye in its own quiet language. You place the spoon beside your notebook. You lie back. You exhale. And your body, heavier than it's been but in a good way, settles into rest. No chest tightness, no restless legs, no worry chewing at the corners of your mind. Just stillness, just warmth, just sleep, waiting for you like an open palm. So now, dear listener, you've arrived at the quiet edge of the night. There is no more to learn for now. No herbs to remember. No dreams to translate. No duppies waiting in the shadows. Just the gentle hush that follows a long journey when your body is full, your breath is steady, and the silence finally feels like home. Let your shoulders sink a little deeper into the bed. Let your hands go soft and still. There's nothing to hold on to here. Nothing to fix. You've walked the forest paths. You've stirred the soups. You've listened to the leaves and the songs, and something inside you answered back without needing words. The wind outside has quieted now. The whisper tree, too, rests. The moon keeps its slow vigil overhead, casting a kind of soft permission across your room. Permission to stop. Permission to sleep. Permission to be held, gently, by nothing more than the night itself. Let the rhythm of your breath slow. Let each inhale feel like drawing in warmth. Let each exhale feel like letting go of something that was never truly yours. And as you settle, maybe you'll hear it too, that low hum at the edge of sleep. The same one that guided Miss Essie's hands, the same one that wrapped steam around your chest. It's still there. It's always been there. And now it belongs to you too. There's nothing left to do, dear listener. Just rest, just breathe, and drift, ever so gently, into sleep.